Hi, I'm Robert E. Williams, and the show is Intuitive Considerations. And the reason it's called that is because when I work in a very intuitive way. So I don't sit down to make something. I sit down and I just start playing, playing or just seeing where it leads me. When I start making marks, putting down paint, picking colors, and then that just leads me into what comes next and what comes next until something starts to surface. So when I work, I guess what I'm doing is I'm searching for something. And so I react to what's happening at that very moment in time. And the show itself is kind of like that too. I mean, I had this idea, put up these works, and what I hope that the viewer will do is to look at individual works, but also make connections, because it's also about those connections and that ongoing making of work. I mean, I see it like a journal, the whole thing. You know, this is my journey, this is my journal. These images are things that gather up, that come out of me. And sometimes I don't even know what they are. And so the biggest thing I hope, and I think the hardest thing for a lot of people maybe that aren't artists, is to understand, to look at something and just be open to how you're interacting with it, how it makes you feel. Sort of like music that doesn't have words. You know, you can't describe, you know, what does a piece of music without words say to you? You know, what does it mean? Doesn't matter. What are you feeling? What are you getting from it? And maybe the next time you hear that same piece of music, you're going to feel a little bit different, or something else is going to come up. So view the works like that, you know. And another thing I think is the nice thing about having them close by each other and having, they're almost like storyboards also. So they start to hopefully bring out things as a whole from you. Not just looking at a piece, but looking at numerous pieces and somehow making some vague connection or very definite connection on how it comes out as you're viewing it. So you don't have to look at everything, you know, but go to what interests you, what draws you, I guess. Not interests you, but what draws you, either negatively or positively. That's okay too. There is a narrative that happens in my head. Sometimes the narrative is, oh, this figure is coming out. I can see a figure coming out, and then allow that figure to come out. And that figure might mean something to me at that moment, but the next time I look at it, it might just be a figure, or, you know, it's really hard to, but there are these sort of vague things. And sometimes they're sort of like, it's kind of like a story between two colors or two shapes, or a color and a shape or a mark, and how they're interacting with each other. So how they're, you know, this one is pushing on this one, you know. But it also could be something more defined, where something starts to look like a figure, like a landscape, like an interior, like an object. But it's not, when it becomes too much like an object, sometimes that's when I start to pull away. Because some of these do look, especially these small ones, these small ink pieces, they really sort of, they have the feeling of things, but I don't want them to be too much a thing. Usually if I sit down to paint, I'll paint on multiples at once, because I'm letting things dry, let's say, and so I've made something. I have to get to the point where I can't, depending on the medium I'm working with, I can't work on this anymore because it's too wet. So I'll set it, and then I'll start just working on another one, and I'll jump from one piece to another, and sometimes they connect. But other times, sometimes they're very much on their own. I can literally jump and go, okay, this feels like landscape, and I'm working on this and landscape. and then set that aside, and then grab the other one back again, and then go, oh, this one's very figurative. I guess because I had some training working in an animation studio and also working in graphic design, so working where I had to go in, especially with animation, I had to go in and I had to produce. I had to make things. You couldn't go, oh, I have to wait till I'm inspired. So my main inspiration, I would say, would just be having time, a block of time to make work. And so when I do that, I just sit down and I make work. I just start doing it. And depending on how much time, if I don't have a lot of time, I'll be doing these little ink drawings or pencil drawings or something like that. Maybe color pencils, small color pencil drawings. And a lot of stuff ends up being small because of my time limits. And then the other work starts to get bigger as I have more time. But what happens is I might say, oh, I have an hour, I'll do a little bit of painting. And then next thing you know, 5 hours has gone by, or it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm still working away. So I make something every day. And this stuff just kind of piles up. It just comes out of me. It's what's coming out of me. And then what happens when I went to do the show, that became a huge thing. In fact, it was kind of almost traumatic to sift through all this work and then try to pick things that made sense. So my living room became sort of my gallery, and I was moving things around and making connections through color and shape and stuff like that, and leaving spaces. You'll see spaces in between the pieces, and those are sort of like breathing spaces, almost like a paragraph or a chapter, if you think of that. Giving spaces to breathe, for the eyes to rest for a moment. But I can actually say that it was kind of traumatic because I'm going through boxes and boxes of work. And that's part of the window display outside shows. That's part of what that shows, is just there's a large volume of stuff that comes out of me, and it's just making it, and that's what interests me. I guess that's why I do it. It's not the sort of job that you're going to because that's your only way of making an income, but this is something that I have to do, and it comes out of me again and again. And I sometimes describe it also like meditation, that when I'm sitting down and working, I'm only thinking about what I'm doing at that moment. So it's very relaxing in a sense. Even if negative things might come up, but that's part of meditation too, is accepting that and then just plowing through that and observing what's happening at that moment. Something I found really interesting, which I hadn't done that much acrylic painting in a while. I'd been doing a lot of the little ink drawings, a lot of the watercolors, and probably because I was teaching, every time I was doing watercolor classes I was teaching, I do a lot of watercolors because I wanted to think about those things at the time. But I think in the last year, I think with the pandemic, was a very it was a big emotional year for a lot of people, and that was in the air. And that's what surprised me. I started by doing some of these. There's some pastel drawings, some pastel pieces over there, oil pastel, and I was pushing the paint, the oil pastel around, and then and I thought, oh, I feel like doing something a little more broader strokes. So I took out the acrylics, and next thing you know, that's it. Really, I felt very emotional, and I felt that they're very much more emotional. Then some of the drawing pieces don't have that same heightened emotion, and I found the paintings, the acrylic pieces, to me, are much more emotional this year. Yeah. What I enjoy doing is when I change a medium or do something, what's happening at that moment is what, So let's say a couple years ago, I saw some oil sticks, tubes of, to draw with oil sticks at an art store were for sale, so I bought a bag of them, and I haven't used them yet. But they're sitting there, and then what I'll do is I'll just say, okay, time to pick those, bring those out, and just start working with those. And then something will come out of that. And each time I change to a different medium, I find that different stuff comes up. It feels different. Sometimes when you haven't worked with something, maybe like an oil paint or something for a while, or an acrylic paint, you'll, at first it's technical, and you're wrestling a little bit with the technical, the technique, the technical aspects of that medium. But then very soon, the other stuff, once you become a little more comfortable, the other stuff starts to come up. And that's what I'm interested in, is the other stuff. At first, I think it was traumatic. It was going, why do I make all this stuff? And so there was a bit of sort of that, looking at that obsession of making it, that it was like, just like, why do I do this? But then realizing, no, this is what I do. I need to do this, or I have to do this. I'm compelled to do it. It's telling me it's time to clean up more space in my studio, so I can maybe do some pieces that are larger, a little bit, go a little bit larger. And I've had an interest. I've been going out with a friend and doing some painting outdoors, which I don't do usually. Just sit there and do landscapes. And I started doing some in the fall, and I'm looking forward to doing some more of that work. I'm more interested in going after the feeling of landscape than the representation of a landscape. Also then taking that information that you gather as you're looking and observing and maybe representing things a little stiffer and a little more representational than I'd normally work. But then that stuff's going to come out later when I'm in my studio and I start making marks, and then that information and those things are going to come out later. I just hope people can come in and enjoy the show and get something out of it, really.